What's going on, Port fans? Welcome back to another video on the channel. Today we're going to be reviewing the 2022 season for Port Adelaide. Overall, a pretty disappointing letdown, I would suggest. Words that are probably appropriate for the season. There are some expletives that could be said about the season, but we're going to keep this professional and look at exactly what went right, what went wrong, and what can improve for 2023 as we look ahead for what's going to be a pretty grueling off-season, I think, both off the field and also on it when it gets to pre-season training. But with the draft and the trade period, you'd expect Port Adelaide to be quite aggressive, and we'll get into that as well with some list management talk too right at the end. So let's get straight into it and let's review Port Adelaide's season of 2022. Let's wrap up this 2022 season. It's been a hell of a ride. It's been a disappointing ride, one that I definitely didn't want to pay for, but ended up paying for anyway. Finished 11th, 10 wins, 12 losses. In my eyes, the best win of the year was against Sydney in round 15, I think that was, at the Adelaide Oval. It was a masterful masterclass performance. We were definitely fantastic. It was our best win of the year against the top four side that eventuated in Sydney. Our leading goal kicker was Todd Marshall with 45 goals. And finally, my prediction for the BNF is Sam Powell-Pepper. Let's get straight into what went wrong for Port Adelaide. And this is probably the most typical Port Adelaide season I could suggest from recent years. Make two prelims, get everyone's hopes up, fail at those two prelims, and most notably finish 11th and not even feature into the top 8 once out of the 22 rounds. That's right, we didn't even place in the eighth position in the top 8 for the whole year. We were not mentioned once in that first part of the ladder, which is really, really disappointing. And it's a real letdown to the Port supporters that stuck by us. We stuck by the club, we stuck by the playing group, and we expected so much better. And I think the response from our team and the players wasn't to the standard, and in particular from Ken Hinkley. Nothing really changed. We went into this year with a coaching panel that was pretty experienced, but lacking. It was lacking a lot, especially with Michael Voss leaving and going to Carlton. So we never really added much depth there. And I think it's a key part of why it was let down. Our season was let down in 2022. There was no real backup for Ken. And I'm not dismissing what Ken Hinkley had to go through. I'm purely saying that Ken Hinkley shouldn't be coaching 2023. That's the perseverance of Port Adelaide and sticking with what they know and not risking what could be. And especially seeing GWS coaching, they're picking Adam Kingsley to coach next year. You've got Alistair Clarkson going to North Melbourne. What will Essendon do? I'm not sure. They could seek out Ken Hinkley, and let me tell you, from a lot of Port fans, the door is very much open. Now, Ken Hinkley isn't the main issue. He's definitely one of the main issues, but he's not also what happened with us on the field. Injuries were a massive concern this year, and it's something I think we've got to look at in terms of the department. It's been, since 18, 19, we've had a lot of injuries that have been niggling. We've had a lot of persevering injuries with the same players and just not getting their bodies right. Orazio Fantasia, Xavier Dersman, Dixon's ankle. There's been hamstring injuries with Lockie Jones. These are countless injuries that from players that are both developing in their prime and coming to an end. And they're not seeing the reward they're putting in because I think that department lacks, and it's really something we've got to look at. And I'm not making this a scathing review of of the football club. We're well placed with the talent we have. It's what we do with it. And now that's been an issue for not 10 years. I won't say the whole of Ken Hinkley's tenure. I think from about 2018 onwards, when we failed to make the 8 in 2018, from being 15-4, I think we were. No, sorry, 11-4. Then we went to 2019. We had a mini rebuild. We got some exciting talent. Didn't quite make the 8. And ultimately failed. 2020 was exceptional, with COVID and battling through those conditions. And we got through that by making a prelim in something we didn't expect. It was a magnificent year. Ken Hinkley was coach of the year. 2021, we battled all year. We had injuries. We had to travel. We had, less home games than we should have. COVID hit. It was a real battle. And we stuck tight as a group, and we got to the prelim with, an ultimate outlook that grand final was pretty much ours to make when we played the Dogs at home after beating Geelong, and ultimately we got pumped and failed. And I think the mentality going from the prelim last year carried through, and it ultimately hurt us, and that's what happens when you start 0-5 as well. It becomes a real challenge to stick tight, and credit to the group. The two things they did show, and I'll get into what went right a little bit later. They did show fight, and they did show they played for each other, and that was very much shown in the showdown at the end for Robbie Gray's farewell. There was a lot of love shown. We got around each other, and it was a real different atmosphere. It was an end of season type atmosphere where we all celebrated the one win against the Crows and went off into the sunset. That ended in 2022. So I mentioned 0-5. I mentioned not making finals. They were massive failures this year. It was a failed season. I'm not going to shy away from that. And a lot has to be looked at. We've guaranteed Ken Hinkley as coach in 2023. That is a given. Unless something changes and Essendon pop up on the doorstep and say, hey, you want to come coach with us? It's a low chance of happening. I'm not going to say it's a given. I'm not going to say it's even a chance. I think it's a very low prospect of Ken Hinkley leaving now. So, just in case it does happen, we've got to have a plan for that when it comes, if it comes, actually, not when it comes. But I will say as well, 2 wins and 7 losses in games decided by 2 goals or less is a very much a Collingwood type scenario where we could have been very much playing finals if we won 3 of those games. We were 2 games out of the 8. We had better percentage than who finished in 8th spot, which was the Western Bulldogs. We beat 2 top 8 sides this year in Sydney and the Western Bulldogs, who basically slid in with pure luck. But in saying that, 2 wins out of the 9 games that we played that were decided by 2 goals or less. That's nearly half of the season that was decided by 2 goals. It's a massive concern considering last year we had the right end of the stick with that. So I'm not saying making finals this year would have done us any good. It definitely would have been helped participating, because I reckon we had some damaging components about us that would have caused a real push to maybe even make a semi-final in the final series, which would have made the season not look so bad, and the turnaround from 0-5 would have been a lot different, and we'd be talking about the season a lot differently. But that's got to change. The mindset's got to change in that aspect, and I know a lot of those games that were decided by 2 goals or less, you're talking the showdown, you're talking the Carlton game. We played with a lot of injuries. We were 50 points down in that Carlton game, so it was a hell of a comeback. Even games like the game against Brisbane in round 1, that was the tipping point. We were 20 points up late in the third quarter, and we let that slip. Like it's that mentality of not finishing that game off. The plus aspect was the St Kilda game, which was basically decided by kicking points. Gold Coast, which was a real arm wrestle. Those were the 2 wins that we had that were 2 goals or less. The Geelong game, we come back, after being 6 or 7 goals down, and we come back and lead at 3/4 time, and then let that slip. Even the Melbourne game, we were involved in that, and it becomes Freo as well. We had opportunities late. Like, I can talk about the ifs and buts for so much of that, that 2-7 aspect. At the end of the day, the job wasn't done, and that comes down to the mentality of the playing group and also the positions we were in early in that game. And it comes down also to the motivation aspect, which comes from the coach as well. I'm going to turn to what went right. What did go right for Port Adelaide? Now, I think a lot of things that went right were player-based, and that one that stands out, he's in the All-Australian squad of 44, and that's Connor Rozee. He was named in the 22 under-22 squad on the half-forward flank. Connor Rozee had an outstanding season. And now, actually, he was debated as being dropped before round 5. Ken Hinkley made the decision, stuffer, I'm chucking him in the middle against Carlton, and he dominated. That's one of the reasons we turned that game around. And ever since then, he won the Peter Badco medal in round 6 against West Coast. He was outstanding throughout the whole year, just kept bringing us into games, and he was changing the momentum. He was very quick on his feet. His dancing shoes, Geelong, played against Geelong at the Adelaide Oval, and he was just dancing around everybody. It was amazing to watch. The showdown medalist in round 23, he was just unbelievable to watch. And I think the development he's had after the season he had last year with the carrying of a knee injury. We've seen glimpses of what he can do, and this is what we've wanted from the Butters, the Dersma, and the Rosie. Is that next step? We've waited for that next step, and now Connor Rosie's made that step. He's in the elite group of the Port Adelaide community. He's probably our best player at the moment, and I just look forward to seeing what he does in 2023 because he's just been super impressive, and words can't describe how excited Port Adelaide fans will be come next year and onwards. It moves into other player development as well. I'm talking Todd Marshall. He was the leading goal kicker for the year. He was absolutely outstanding. 45 goals, and it was turned around from when he was absolutely bagged and dismantled by Port fans and the media against Hawthorn in round 2. The alarm bells were ringing in round 2 for the Port Adelaide community when he got pumped by Hawthorn. And he had to play back in the second half simply because, one, we had no tall backman, and two, he just couldn't find the footy. Round 3 comes along against the Crows. Yeah, we lost to the after the siren. But it was Todd Marshall's 5 goals that lit a light, and it was the whole playing group that got around him when he kicked his first goal, and he really took that game apart, which was sensational to see. And then ever since then, get big bags of goals against West Coast Eagles, and he dominated the Western Bulldogs game. He's going to be right up there in the BNF. And then, the 4 goals to finish off in the showdown, he was just constantly making his mark, and it was just so impressive to see what he could do when he takes those big grabs, when he brings that his leading forward patterns are right, and his goal kicking was sensational this year. It was just an outstanding season from Todd, and I'm really grateful and I'm really impressed with the fact that he's been able to turn it around and actually find his potential. And full credit to everyone who's eaten their words on it and actually been, hey, Todd Marshall, you've been fantastic. Big pat on the back. Now let's go into 2023 and see it again. Sam Powell-Pepper's another one. He was absolutely fantastic again. Crossroads last year. Thought about being traded to the West Coast Eagles. Didn't. Stayed with Port. The job was simple. You have to stand up and do this. We saw glimpses in the trial match. We saw glimpses in the preseason. He got injured. And unfortunately, that hindered his last couple of weeks in the preseason. But as soon as he started and he just kept building and building, he was absolutely enormous with his pressure acts and his efforts to try and win every single footy. This was every contest of every single quarter of every single game. Sam Powell-Pepper was there giving 110%, 4th, 5th, 6th efforts I've seen from him, and he was absolutely astronomical. And his goals from outside 50 was second in our goal kicking list this year with 24 goals. Just such an impressive human being to fall from what he's been through to turn it around and have such a great year. He's my pick for the best and fairest this year. I know Connor Rosie's been fantastic and Todd Marshall excellent, but I think he was absolutely amazing throughout the whole year, and he would be my pick for the best and fairest. I talked about injuries before, and with the scenarios in the ruck with Teakle doing his collarbone when he debuted, Riset's ruck, his shoulder injury since round 4 against the D's, which was an absolute low light, by the way. He didn't get back into the game. We had to pursue with Sam Hayes, who didn't quite work out as well as I think a lot of Port fans and the club were hoping, which was a little disappointing. And it'll be interesting to see what the plan is for him going into next year. But stood up was Jeremy Finlayson and Charlie Dixon in particular as well. But Jeremy Finlayson in the ruck was just so impressive, and he just competed and competed. And what he brought was not as much hit outs, which hit-outs are starting to become a little bit overrated now. Anyway, hit-outs to advantage as well. He became a 4th midfielder when the ball hit the ground. He was able to dance through the packs. He was able to pick up his own footy and set up a lot of key plays going inside 50. And that's what turned our scoring around as well in the second half of the year. He probably stood out a lot more when he was playing the lesser ruckman, but definitely against Geelong in the second half. When Stanley went down, he definitely brought our game back into it, and that's one of the key aspects of us getting back into that game. I think, the game against Wits with Gold Coast, he just stood his ground. He started being, controlling what was happening after the tap, comparing to what he would have done in the contest of actually doing the tap work and creating hit-outs to advantage. Such an impressive season from what he had to stand up with in the scenario of our ruck stocks. And we brought out the best in Jeremy Finlayson, as Ken Hinkley said as well. So that was such a massive tick in my eyes. A couple of things before I get into the list management. I'm going to talk about Jace Burgoyne. His debut against Fremantle, he had 20 touches. It was absolutely such an impressive unit. And I'm so glad that his development was shown in the few games he had in the back end of the year. He took over Bonner's spot, and he was really impressive with his attack on the footy. For such a skinny build and a light frame, he was able to take on the game. He kicked the goal against Collingwood for his first goal. The massive goal against Richmond at home was sensational to see. Such an impressive unit for a young kid to debut in his first year. Shows a lot of faith the club has in him, and I'm very much looking forward to how he goes into 2023 because another pre-season under his belt, add a couple of kilos, and find a little bit more of your craft, and he could be anything. Lastly, I will say the fifth best defence in the league was Port Adelaide. Another sensational year. We had no tall defenders for the first half of the year, pretty much. We persisted with Sam Skinner, who didn't work out as well as we would have liked. But Tom Jonas, Trent McKenzie when he was in the side, Tom Cleary was absolutely fantastic when he was in, and Aliir finding his feet in the second half of the year. We were able to keep our defensive stocks well, and I'm talking Burton, I'm talking Houston. They were so impressive throughout the year. Darcy Byrne-Jones found some form late, but overall, our defensive unit was fantastic, and if it wasn't for the struggles down forward in the early part of the season, then I think a lot of those games I talked about where it was close would have changed. So I move into list management. Now, Port Adelaide have already announced 6 departures. We've seen Sam Mays, Sam Skinner and Taj Schofield delisted. We've seen Carl Amon knowing he's going to be exploring free agency, and the retirements of Stephen Motlop and one of the greatest in Robbie Gray. They've all gone. 6 spots on the table so far. A few others will be up for trade. Definitely would be spoken about already with the exit meetings, but those are the 6 so far, and I'm thinking a couple more. Miles Bergman looks likely he's going to go. I think Riley Bonner will be up for the trade table. I think he fell out of favour in the second half of the season, especially with the development of Burgoyne, and it's a spot that we have a lot of. I would really like to find another left footer actually going into the trade period. To be interesting to see how that works out, but we do have Josh Sin waiting in the eyes as well, so he'll be keen to get back with a full pre-season under his belt and not be injury riddled like he was in his first season. So those have been the changes, and I think a lot of those probably worthy. Taj Schofield a little bit stiff. I would like to see him have a bit more of a go, but Sam Mays, Sam Skinner didn't impress as much, and they were bound to go. And Carl Amon, that was the most professional free agency plan we've had with a player. It was such a mature process that we went through, and to keep on, just keeping on and making sure that we continue to have that respectful nature about deciding who stays and who goes. And Carl, we knew was going to go from the outset, and that was a mature process. So well done to both parties. Who do we target? Well, we've obviously heard a lot of the rumours, and I'll be getting into those a little bit separate videos as well. But Josh Dunkley seems to be the main target. Hearing some rumours about Brad Close from Geelong could be a possibility. A small forward is definitely on our eyes, and that's what we need. We need another tall defender. Wouldn't mind seeing Ben Mackay from North Melbourne be a possible target as well. And also, I spoke about it in another video, Brody Grundy could be still an option with our ruck stocks. The dismantled Lysette, Teakle still development, Hayes we're not sure about, and Byzantini's obviously still young and still raw. So Grundy could be an option there as well if we want another tilt at the flag next year, if we're going to come back and actually decide to play finals. So Port fans, let's hear your comments below on this 2022 season. Ultimately, it's an F. It's a failure for the year. We didn't make finals, we didn't have another tilt, we had injuries, and 0-5 definitely ruined us for the year. We were right into our eyeballs, I feel like, to make finals, and we just failed at every aspect of it. But it means motivation for next year. What changes, what comes, we'll see what happens over the off-season. I'm very much looking forward to talking about it with you all. Make sure you subscribe. Let's get on board, and let's get on board with the AFLW as well. That's one of the key aspects of this year. Our first season in the AFLW. It's season 7. Get around the girls, and I'm very much looking forward to round 1 against the West Coast Eagles. So get around it. Thank you so much for watching. My name is Anthony, and as always, count the pair.